I don't think it's unreasonable for people to want minimum wage to match in an app is. Riders are overcharged and drivers are underpaid. I agree with that. The average rideshare driver in America makes 80 cents per mile. If you're making over $1 per mile, good job. But I'm okay with increased competition. I expect you to be one of the top earners in your city. I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have seen what would happen if Uber and Lyft left the city. Minneapolis Uber, Lyft drivers gathered to push for higher pay. So this was written on January 30, and this is coming from NPR News. Minnesota Uber and Lyft drivers took a pause from their usual routes to make their voices heard in Minneapolis City Hall Tuesday. Their message, "We're not making enough." A new report published by the Minneapolis Office of the City Auditor Policy and Research Division compared pay under 3 different compensation models and rates for Lyft and Uber drivers. It projected rates for each model for trips to City Hall from each ward to compare them. Interesting way to do it. Model A suggests drivers would make $1.40 per mile, an increase from the 56 cents per mile they say they currently make. So that's almost $1 increase. That's really good if that comes true. The report said while it produced higher compensation rates than the other 2 models, Model A utilized the work of the Seattle report and accounted for localized factors and scope to determine rates per minute and mile. So previously, if you're just kind of tuning into this drama, this has been going on for a few months in Minnesota, Minneapolis. One government branch enacted a change for rideshare drivers in that city. And I believe it was the governor who said, nah, he vetoed it. So it didn't come to fruition because Uber and Lyft were threatening to leave. But the governor said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do some research instead of making arbitrary changes. So I guess this is the result of what that research is. And I think that's it. I think that it's important to do the research before making huge changes. So from a middle ground perspective, I think that's okay. So we'll see how much this has developed since then. City staff figured Seattle's rideshare compensation at $1.55 per mile. Accounting for benefits, Seattle provides, but Minneapolis does. The city's rate was calculated at $1.40 per mile. Of the 3, Model B appears to produce outcomes that should bring drivers within the minimum compensation range. More information on its formulation would be necessary to determine how it accounts for incurred expenses, such as vehicle maintenance, the report said. Okay. As Model C with a flat rate, while the simplest approach that meets the compensation range poses challenges by not accounting for trip volume, traffic patterns, vehicle depreciation, or wear and tear. I wish instead of telling me what the issues are with these different models, they would just tell me what the models are. Minnesota Uber and Lyft Drivers Association President Eid Ali, he was on the Rideshare Guy podcast last week. If you go back in time, you want to check that out. It's pretty good. He says compensation should meet or exceed Minneapolis's large employer minimum wage of $15.57 per hour. I think that's a fair ask that Uber and Lyft should have outcomes that allow people to make more than the minimum of that state. Now, I showed you my numbers. People in my town are making about $15 an hour on average with Lyft, and I'm making about double that. So you can see that strategy does play a role into it. But I don't think it's unreasonable for people to want minimum wage to match what the minimum they make in an app is. I know that's business owner like or independent contractor like, but I don't think it's unreasonable. All of these drivers, including myself, are struggling. We're not making enough to feed our families. And that is why we need to say it out loud and bring our voices to the places where they belong to. Minneapolis Councilmember Robin Wansley joined drivers and criticized Model B, which she said was supported by Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. The example that's in the report reveals that the mayor's proposal, Model B, means drivers are actually earning about 30% less per ride than they would earn in Model A, our original proposal, she said. So, of course, the drivers are going to want the higher proposal, which is also their original proposal. So I get the frustration. There was really no way that unless the mayor straight up agreed to the original proposal, that there'd be no frustration. But back and forth is healthy. Having numbers to back up why you pick certain models is healthy too. This is the drivers here. This is Edie right here off to the side. Mayor Frey continues to support paying Minneapolis rideshare drivers a fair and equitable wage, said Press Secretary Ali Peters. And she said the model Frey supports, Model B, would roughly double the current pay for drivers, which that's a lot. Wait, hold on. She's saying 15. Are they suggesting that they make about $7 now per hour? Is that because if it's doubling and if it meets it at the $15 mark, is that what they're saying? Farron has been driving for Uber and Lyft since 2018 and said riders are overcharged and drivers are underpaid. I agree with that. We are asking for the mayor to listen to the residents of the city, to listen to the drivers, to work with the city council members so we can pass the best city ordinance regarding rideshare regulations. Last year, Frey vetoed an ordinance, I think that's the governor, vetoed an ordinance that would have required higher pay and better protections for rideshare drivers in the city. I guess it's the mayor. Lyft and Uber were against the ordinance. I just told you guys that. Lyft officials argued the policy would make fares too expensive in the city, while Uber sent a message to customers asking them to lobby the mayor and council members to oppose the policy. To feel slimy, the company said they'd stop serving the city if the ordinance, which was later vetoed, went into effect in January. I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have seen what would happen if Uber and Lyft left the city. I want to see how that would have happened. City officials said they expect the council to take a final vote sometime in March. So we'll continue following up with this. Expect them to become more vocal, more demonstrations in order to spread the word. But they weren't very clear on what the different models were. So let's use AI to figure out what it is. What are the proposed rideshare models for Minneapolis? As of February 5th, 2024, there are 3 main proposed rideshare models for Minneapolis being debated. Model A, which is the original proposal, minimum compensation of $1.40 per mile and 51 cents per minute for time transporting a customer. This is seen as the most favorable to drivers, potentially the city's large employer minimum wage, supported by the Minimum Uber and Lyft Drivers Association. Model B, which is Mayor Frey's proposal, minimum compensation rate of $1.17 per mile and 34 cents per minute for time transporting a customer. Lower than Model A, but still aimed at increasing driver pay. May not fully cover vehicle expenses according to some drivers. This is reasonable to me, honestly. If you come up minimum floors, the average rideshare driver in America makes 80 cents per mile. That's something I've looked up in the past and I've showed on screen. I'm not going to find it right now, but on average, it's 80 cents per mile per GridWise, which tracks rideshare numbers and things like that. The standard, like the gold standard, is like if you're making over $1 per mile, a lot of drivers on Facebook or in the comments to be like, "Good job." Most people agree $1 per mile is like that's if you're doing better than that, you're doing okay. So if their minimum is set to $1.17, I think that's fine. I think that's pretty middle ground, pretty acceptable, pretty normal. But they want higher than that, which I'm not going to fault people for wanting more. But as someone who is trying to see both sides, I think this is pretty reasonable. And if they're able to get this, I think they will be better than what they have now. And I think it'd be significant enough. Now, will it eventually need to be this? Maybe. But I think this is extremely reasonable. So let's see what Model C is. So Model C is a flat rate of $24 per hour applied only during pickup and transportation time. The simplest approach, but doesn't account for volume traffic or vehicle wear and tear. Might not incentivize enough driving in low demand times or areas. I'm not a particular fan of this flat, unless that's the flat minimum. Like if you're saying this driver can make more than $24 an hour, but will protect you from falling underneath $24 an hour, that's cool. At this point, if they're paying you $25 only applied during pickup and transportation, you can't go higher than that, then you are an employee at that point. And Model C would be hurtful to me and hopefully to my viewers. I expect my viewers to be making more than $24 an hour, like before taxes and expenses. Of course your market plays a role into it, but I expect you to be like a top earner in your city, eventually. Right? If you're new, then you're new. You got some stuff to learn, but I expect you to be one of the top earners in your city. And if they cap how much money you can make, let's verify, right? Is Model C capped at 24 or is that just the min? Let's see what they say here. This is AI. AI can display inaccurate information, but it's typically pretty good. So it says you're correct. There seems to be some ambiguity around the cap in Model C for Minneapolis rideshare proposals. Here's what I found. Some sources describe Model C as having a flat rate of 24 per hour without mentioning a cap. This implies that drivers would earn exactly $24 per hour regardless of the number of rides they complete or the total hours they drive. However, other sources suggest a 24-hour minimum income rather than a fixed rate. This means drivers could potentially earn more than $24 per hour based off of the number of rides and their duration. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a definitive answer about whether there's a cap on Model C. It's possible that different versions of the proposal were considered or that the final details haven't been fully decided, which is fair because the final details have not been fully decided. All right, so what would I pick? And what would you pick? Let me know in the comments. What do you want, Model B? I think everyone wants Model A. I don't think anyone would want Model C. So from my perspective, I would pick Model A, but I would do so knowing that it would increase, it would saturate the market even more. But I'm okay with increased competition because like I said earlier, I expect to be the best. If not the best, close to it. So I think Tristan Thomas, even if the market became more saturated, would make more money with Model A overall. I would just continue working the hours that I know other drivers aren't working. And I know that like certain holidays, people just don't work, whether you're a driver or whoever, even though there's like a lot of rides. I would just continue working on at those times. So Model A would be great. I'd still be happy with Model B. Model B is better than what I have now. I think I get paid like 80 cents per mile. Like not like in my overall earnings, but like if you look at my rate card, Charleston Lyft rate card. Let's do 2023. So the rate card is kind of deprecated, but it still exists, but it's not what's primarily used. I don't think it says 98 cents, but okay. I'm being lazy again, and I'll stop being lazy, and I can tell you my exact rate card based off of my account.